20 WEMB Sports Radio.
Marky Billson here with you. It's Tri-City Sports Now on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio, as well as jetbroadcasting.live for the online, take us with you on your iPhone. That's, I get these things where, I got trouble hearing you and wherever. I actually was able to pick it up, the 1420 5,000 watt signal around Abingdon. Now, it was sort of that fringe listening to, I had heard you could do that, and I know our coverage map says that you can, and I was actually able to do that because I had a rental car this weekend, and I was driving around, and, anyway. But, I do understand, though, that you'd get if you are in Abingdon, you'd get the show, obviously, a lot more clearer, as well as the best sports talk lineup in the market. And just look, from Chuck Oliver to Colin Coward, Dan Patrick, to the Fox Sports Radio Network, and lest I forget, Outkick the Coverage with Clay Travis, as well as moi. It's the best sports talk lineup in the market. There's not any question about that. And anyway, you have that, and so you want to listen to www.jetbroadcasting.live for that. You also want to be able to watch the show on Facebook, and that way, if you miss Tri-City Sports Now with me, Marky Billson, you can kind of listen in, and you can go archive. I archived the show. I didn't slug it this weekend. I'm a bit remiss. I'll have to do that today. I was talking a little bit about Bert Rechichar, who I knew, and I was telling you how I knew him. It was a chance meeting when I was writing for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He was a bus driver for a girls' soccer team, a girls' high school soccer team, and befriended him. Took a while for the article for him to, return the calls. He was kind of hard scrabble, a little bit of that. He also lived to be 89. He was a cigarette smoker, too. I remember that. And, but no, here he was, Tennessee, Pittsburgh guy, and so was I, so, this was a real, real big thrill. And I started talking, anyway, from my article, I was looking for outside sources, people who knew him. One of them that I turned to is Frank DeFord. This is how I knew the legendary sports writer Frank DeFord the one time I talked about him. Frank DeFord was as a teenager, his mother actually took him to the first Colts game in Baltimore, 53, in the NFL. And he saw the field goal. And after that, world's tallest midget, Frank DeFord, great sports writer, right there on the Mount Rushmore of all sports writers. His favorite football player, his favorite athlete, wasn't John Unitas, it was Bert Rechichar. I'll bet you didn't know that. Yeah, that was his favorite player. And Rechichar was the 57 Pro Bowl MVP. Rechichar played in the greatest game ever played in 1958. That was, of course, the Colts defeating the Giants in overtime, 23-17, first overtime game in NFL history. And, Alan Amichis, he did the kickoffs on that. And I remember, because after the story, I had his phone number, and I remember calling him while they were doing sort of the Indianapolis Colts and the New York Giants 50 years later, or whatever it was, watch the greatest game ever played. And I said, and there was Rechichar, in the broadcast and all this. And I mentioned, I called up his number. Hey, are you watching it? I left a message, was never returned, that sort of thing. But don't think that he wasn't, obviously, if he's 57 Pro Bowl MVP, a big star, and obviously in Tennessee lore, he should not be forgotten. I've always said the greatest living volunteer was John Majors. Because after all, here's a guy who did everything he can name on the field. Led the Vols from 4-6 to undefeated regular season. From a sophomore to from 54 to 56. 54 Vols are 4-6, 56 behind John Majors. They're undefeated. And they lose the bowl game, but anyway. Johnny then. should have won the Heisman Trophy over Paul Hornung. That's not homerism. I know that there's now an effort to say that maybe Jim Brown should have, but I defy you. Certainly, look, Hornung was on a 2-8 team. His touchdown to interception ratio as a single wing halfback was 3 TD passes, 13 interceptions. Hornung was a media creation. Okay, I mean, and yeah, Notre Dame and all that, and he won at the beginning of the season, that sort of thing. But I've always thought that Major's career really did, on the field at Tennessee, mirror that of Peyton Manning's. I mean, what did Manning do that Majors didn't? Majors took his team to an undefeated record. I mean, you want to talk about being number 2 or, they're Tennessee fans. The argument for Charles Woodson over Peyton Manning, by the way, is much stronger than the argument for Hornung over Majors, or for that matter, Jim Brown, if you want to get into it. But yeah. Regardless. The Rechichar, though, I've always said that with Majors, you got that, the playing, but then he's won 3 SEC titles as a coach. He's the guy that really sets the foundation for the 1990s dynasty that the Vols had with the improvement of facilities and so on, was Majors. He's the coach of the 85 Sugar Bowl team. That's what he wins the SEC 3 times. So, I mean, he also is this, very prominent coach for Tennessee. Well, that's got to be the greatest living figure in Vols history, right? Well, until just this weekend, what about Rechichar? Because he did it leading the team to a national championship, and they were number 1 in the AP poll. I mean, you can say they weren't the best team because they lost the Sugar Bowl, but still, I mean, that's how they were selected back in those days. So, 51 national championship, AP number 1. I'm going to give that credence, but there's certainly far more. I mean, Tennessee's trying to tell you that they've won a national title a couple years in the 1960s. That's ridiculous. No, they didn't. No, that did not happen. I mean, there's some sort of ancillary, statement that they've sort of come up with. That's like, Oklahoma saying, we're the New York Times national championship in 1986. Well, they were. Well, what the? Yeah, okay. So you've got that. But consider, then, Rechichar, not only football star, team captain of the first national champion in Vols history, but he leads them to the College World Series as well. In terms of athletic achievements, that's tough to beat, certainly in 1 year. I remember writing about him, Rechichar. Like I said, he was a freshman of fire. He was kind of a rough guy, that sort of thing. But I had a good conversation, enjoyed talking to him. I remember, traded once a car for a refrigerator, and then about, 10 years later, got the 1948 Ford back. I mean, this is sort of dumb stuff like that you did, and he, for years, after his playing career ended, the main drag in Baltimore, Maryland, the main city drag is Harford Road. That would be, Main Street in Irwin, Roan Street in Johnson City, you want to say State Street in Bristol, that would be like that, okay? The main road in Baltimore is Harford Road. For years, Bert Rechichar had a bar on Harford Road, which in itself was rather impressive. It was called? It was called the Top Kick, because he had the record for how long, And, I remember talking, hey, what years we run the Top Kick there? But, yeah, I mean, he was part of all that. And that's one of the reasons, here's the broken record. I'm opposed to franchise relocation because you've destroyed the Colts now, and you don't have that. And you don't. Some guy in North Dakota tried to say, no, you do, they're still the Colts. No. Nobody in Indianapolis went to the Top Kick. And there's a relationship team to town. It is dubious, but people do think, that, hey, they're the Tennessee Volunteers. They represent Tennessee. Even though the people that are on the field have no idea who you are. Same thing, pro sports. They're the Baltimore Colts. They represent Baltimore. They're the Indianapolis Colts. They represent Indianapolis. Rechichar, later years, like a lot of athletes, sort of bounced around. He was a known kicker and all that. I know in 1960 he played for the Steelers, the Bobby Lane. I think Tom Tracy was on that team, Tennessee. So, they were... I don't believe Tracy was, he was a senior of 54, so they wouldn't have played together on the varsity. They would have gone to school together. But, a bit of a reunite, that sort of thing. But no, nevertheless, like I said, Bert Rechichar passing away at 89 years of age. He is a guy that should be much, much, much more remembered than he is. And, he had the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on the program. But with Rechichar, I wondered, hey, here's a Pro Bowl MVP, once had the longest field goal in the history of the NFL. Could this guy be a Hall of Famer? And I haven't received a whole lot of, yes, he could. I remember DeFord basically with a wink in his eye that you could detect over the phone and a smile on the lips said, well, I don't know, but maybe. That's when I talked to him about Rechichar and getting memories of Rechichar. He wanted to give his memories for my story in the Post-Gazette on Rechichar, historical notes. And... again, I don't know if it's there, but you are talking about somebody who really should be more prominently remembered, not only in the history of the University of Tennessee, but also really NFL at large. And if that's a posthumous bust in Canton when they expand the senior committee, okay. But if it's not, just the fact that we have, we speak about him here. That sort of thing. Again, it's an incredible story. Just overcoming the murder of your father to, in your very first game, kick the longest field goal in the history of the NFL. And also be, like I said, the athletic... Tell me someone whose athletic achievements really go beyond... Captain, national champion team in football, baseball, same year leading that team to the College World Series. He could have played Major League Baseball, too, Bert Rechichar. He went with football. So, passing away recently, over the weekend, that was on Friday. He was 89 years old. You can listen to, on our archives, you can find him on YouTube, Ron Neckeye, talking about growing up with him. I'm the only guy in this market who would have known that Rechichar and Neckeye, two very, prominent East Tennessee sports figures, had a background as youths. Jim Johnson is next. Tri-City Sports Now.
All-American Savings.